the difficulty of thinking for yourself. And it goes back to the idea of a mob mentality and requiring a mob for you to think for yourself. When you have nothing to validate your own beliefs, and that's a lot of the times what people are trying to do is look for people and look for figures for themselves to look up to validate their own beliefs. And it helps you go through with your convictions when you know you're not a lone wolf, when you're going out and trying to accomplish something, when you know there's someone else that believes what you believe, someone that you may look up to, or someone that might help you help validate your beliefs by them believing in it and saying the same kinds of things, and then you may regurgitate what they say and things like that. And you can find examples in everything, in anything you say, memes, things like where you just regurgitate based on a popular meme that you may have heard, you don't even remember where it is, things that you may regurgitate even if you don't necessarily think about it, and that doesn't necessarily come down to the idea of a mob mentality, just the difficulty of thinking for yourself. That's all we are, is memes and ideas, and it helps when especially when looking to someone else consciously or even subconsciously, how we use them to validate our own beliefs, or look at them and we look at people who agree with already preconceived notions, and we use those preconceived notions almost in a way to help validate our own beliefs in continuation and believing something else. And if they validate our beliefs, then we look at what they say, and they say something that, they say something we agree with, and they say something else that you didn't know, that you didn't have they say something else that you didn't have an opinion on, then you'll start validating, then you'll start looking at those beliefs and agreeing with those beliefs because they already validated your beliefs to begin with. So you find someone that agrees with you, then they say something that you didn't know about, then you'll start agreeing with everything they say. And you can watch this, and there's plenty of examples like in the news based on preconceived biases, preconceived notions, and things like that. Where certain news networks or things like that have a bias already, a notion or a bias based on what they already believed, and say someone that is for a certain president or a certain congressman or someone like that, and they agree with everything they say, and they see them on the news networks and everything, and the news anchors and things like that, and the news anchors, even the people watching the news, and they take the news and they agree with the news to begin with because it validates their own ideas and their basic ideas of beliefs, and they start believing everything that the news networks say. And they start, even to a point, to believing what they say afterwards and saying things that contradict their own beliefs, and they'll just start believing those things that contradict their own beliefs, their own preconceived notions, their own beliefs that they had before, say they watched the news network, and they start believing things that contradict their own values that they didn't see to begin with. So they'll just start believing different things based on what someone said, based on one thing that they found that they agreed with to begin with, and then they'll watch it and they'll listen to it longer and longer, and eventually they'll start having opinions that the people that they're watching will start spewing opinions that are against, or initially that are against the initial notions that the person that was watching had, and then in the end, the person watching will end up agreeing with something that they completely disagreed with, just because a person or a thing that they were watching agreed with one thing they said. They started watching it, and then the things that they said afterwards were things that they disagreed with, but the person watching will start agreeing with it just because they liked something, and they found that the thing that they were watching, or the person they were watching, agreed with one thing that they said, and they'll just start watching and listening and contradicting and changing their beliefs just based off the person they like. And it's in a way almost trying to put your barriers down, and a lot of people will subconsciously rely on their emotions as a way of using their logic and the mechanism in which they find some kind of usefulness. It's about finding usefulness in something, and if they don't find usefulness emotionally in something, or something that's going to help prop them up, give them some kind of motivation, or some kind of inspiration to move forward, to give them some idea of hope, or whatever it may be, the validation that they're looking for, and if they don't have that, they're not going to find any value in you, at least to initially begin with. And that's about opening the gates, opening the emotional floodgates, to make sure that you can get someone open before you start spewing strong ideas. Otherwise, they're just going to throw you away and not consider any idea of thinking about that. And this goes to the idea, and I think I wanted to mention something about looking at from other people's point of view. How you have to look from other people's point of view when it comes to understanding. And I guess this is another topic I wanted to mention in this video when it comes to understanding, and I think this is a completely different topic, and it's more about psychology and less about sociology, and which has to do with psychology, but this is more about pure psychology and understanding, looking from different people's point of view. So understanding different people's point of view and almost putting yourself in their shoes, and hypothetically speaking, thinking about putting yourself in their shoes and using that as a way of understanding different people's point of view, and things like that. And it comes down to this idea that understanding someone else's point of view, you have to usually sometimes when you can't necessarily see something in yourself, sort of like peer editing something, and when you peer edit something, you since say you wrote it, or you, even if you didn't wrote it, you correct the mistakes that you see, then you pass it on, and they correct the mistakes that they see. And if you wrote it especially, and you try to look over your rough draft of a paper that you do, then you have someone else check it, and once they check it, you pass it on to someone else, because different people may notice different mistakes, and from different points of view they notice different things, and that can almost say something about a person's psychology and what they pay attention to, state of mind and all sorts of things. A lot of things can come into consideration and cause all sorts of problems. That's why our minds and perceptions are so malleable. They can change so to such an extreme that sometimes things don't even seem familiar. Some things seem so distorted and things like that. Yeah, and it comes down to the idea of thinking for yourself in a way, looking from other people. Back to the whole thinking to yourself kind of thing. It comes down to the validation based on accountability and responsibility. When you know you're the only one saying something, you don't want to take accountability. You don't want to take accountability and responsibility for what you're saying, especially when you know no one else is backing you up, or someone that you look up to isn't backing you up or agreeing with what you say. So no one is validating your beliefs, may say directly, or at least opening their mouths and saying that they believe exactly what you believe. So it's about having reinforcement when it comes to, it's like a momentum pushing force that helps you push forward and believe a certain thing. And back to the news thing, it goes back to the same thing of news networks have certain biases for politicians, or like say CNN has, or like a specific news network, or Fox News, or MSNBC, or CBS, or any of those NBC, any of those news networks have biases towards certain politicians. Say like one of the news networks has a bias towards the president, and so they have a bias towards the president because they were supposed to, based on paying off, but also based on the psychology, the way their psychology works. Even if you were seeing them without saying being bribed by a news network to have certain censorship in certain ways, being forced to have a certain way or talk a certain way or say certain things based on the news network's bias or something, even if you disregard that and you get a person's real opinion, say on a news network, at least hypothetically, and trying to be in a realistic kind of an example, and trying to give an example without any kind of preconceived bias, but considering an individual circumstance and not a network circumstance. But a network circumstance can do the same thing. A network can have a bias for a president or a person, or a certain politician or a person, or a news anchor could have a certain bias based on the fact that they have a bias for the person, and they take what they believe, even if it's not everything they believe, and they take everything that they say, and they just take their opinion, the person they look up to, or they have a bias for his opinion, and they start replacing their own personal opinion with their opinion, almost in a way shape-shifting their own beliefs, almost in a way to confuse them, almost in a way it's in their subconscious, where they don't necessarily know, or know that they're being convinced of some other kind of truth. They're almost in a way fooling themselves when they're letting themselves be opened up without necessarily recognizing exactly what they're opening themselves up to, someone else's opinion based on their own preconceived biases, and the person says something against their own beliefs, or their own personal beliefs, maybe that they have on the inside, some very inside beliefs that they don't share, beliefs that they're very deep inside of them that they don't share, and then all of a sudden it starts contradicting those beliefs that they have inside, and they start adopting those new beliefs based on someone that they have a bias for, or someone that validates their beliefs to begin with, and then starts changing those and says something else that they may have disagreed with, that they didn't know that the other person believed, and they start taking that and using that as their own opinion. It starts changing their opinion. So I wanted to cover one more thing real quick. So it comes down to, and this is another different topic, like sort of taking from a person's different perspective, and it comes down to the frustration, the psychology, the frustration, and understanding that we obviously have to look from another person's point of view, and obviously your own psychology say that you're seeing something. Seeing something that's not true, say like a hallucination or some kind of distortion in reality. Obviously your psychology is the only thing you have, and your psychology is the most important thing. It's real, it's existing. That's the very thing that makes your life important. Your sensations, your feelings, the psychology, the neurology causing these senses and all these feelings, and that's the most important thing that you can have. It's the very foundation of the interaction that you're having with this world. Is the interaction based on your psychology, interacting with the outside world, based on this whole system working together, based on the crude forces causing all these things to work in a certain way, interacting with each other. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm part of this world. My psychology is part of this world. The network, the very foundation, the very function, the mechanism that's causing this is based on everything that's happening around us. Everything around us is created based on certain circumstances. Obviously, circumstances that are very aberrant, very, very rare, and that kind of thing, based on the environment, regardless of if this is a rare circumstance, a rare phenomenon such as life and sentience. It's still part of this reality. It was still based on the forces that were happening just in a very specific circumstance, based on within specific circumstances, based on very rare circumstances, and all sorts of things coagulating and moving in a certain way together, sort of like the perfect storm, causing all these things to happen, perfect storm after perfect storm, leading to a conclusion, a finality, leading to some kind of event. And the event was based off the crude forces, and we're still playing by the crude forces, even though we're aware of these crude forces that are happening around us. We're being subjected to the crude forces that created us to begin with, and we're just being subjected to it only with this sentience awareness around us happening. So back to the idea of you're looking through another person's point of view. Obviously, the only thing you have is your psychology. So when it comes down to taking another person's point of view, obviously that's important. But say you're seeing an hallucination and someone's telling you you're not seeing something that's real. It doesn't matter if they're telling you. Only if them telling you changes your mind, or them convincing you that takes away that pain that you're feeling. But if taking away the fact that words can change something so significantly, and they're just telling you that your leg isn't cut off, but you told yourself that if I get my leg cut off, I have no worth living. I'm a skateboarder, I'm a surfer, or I use my legs like I like riding bike, or whatever it may be. Whatever you may use to use your legs, and someone's saying, "Oh, just change your mind, convince yourself that it's okay in the end, and try to change yourself and acclimate yourself to a certain circumstances." And that goes back to the coping thing. How much are you willing to take before it's too much? How much are you willing to let a thought go before it just becomes a thing of the past? Letting yourself move beyond it, almost in a way defeating the purpose of life, letting things take you down and bring yourself back up. And coping more and more only takes away from the mechanism that makes life so worth living, is going through these small things. And it's really about going and trying. It's all about the satisfaction in the end. It doesn't matter as much about the thing that you're trying to avoid as much as it's trying to maintain something that's satisfaction, because the satisfaction is, in the end, is sort of like eating, the only thing that's important. It doesn't matter how fast, how much gratification you get, or whatever it is. The complacency, the contentment is all that really matters in the end. The satisfaction of building up your sexual urges so long, or holding your bladder so long, only lasts so long. The build-up is very fleeting, and it ends in just some complacency and satisfaction. And the satisfaction is what really matters, is to maintain that satisfaction without going to a negative so far as to make it not worth it to get the satisfaction that you need, based on a zero sum, by reaching the satisfaction by not going to as low a level to get to that satisfaction. So you want to maintain the satisfaction. You want to get to the satisfaction with as little negative as possible, so that if you can do this, if you can stay here and try to move it up more like this, and thinking it's more of a hypothetical situation, because life brings these things to you. You're not going to be able to keep it here all the time, but considering a life strategy and trying to understand it, at least hypothetical situations, it's best in circumstances where you feel like you have enough control over the circumstances, when you feel like you can do something and controlling yourself to a certain extent. Obviously, and within the world that we're living in, not deterministically speaking, but speaking in the world that we're living, obviously we still have control over our psychologies to a certain extent, obviously, and not viscerally reacting. Taking consideration, we obviously viscerally act, and that's everything we're doing, is just a bunch of visceral reactions and vibrations and jerks and things like that. But trying to maintain something as much close to there as possible, and not going down as much, because it's the end satisfaction and not how you get to the satisfaction. What satisfies you in the end, getting to that satisfaction, like an orgasm leading to complacency, and you feel like you're fine. You just want to lay down and take a nap, or whatever it may be. Or once you're done eating, you have a full stomach, but you're not full. It's too full, where you feel like you want to throw up, or whatever it may be. So our psychology is the only thing that we have, and obviously that's the only thing we can take seriously. So no matter how much someone's convincing you that it's okay, all that matters to me is my psychology, because that's the way I'm viewing the world. So taking someone's opinion, sort of like taking someone's opinion, like asking them, do I look ugly in this dress? The same old example, cliched example, asking, do I look ugly in this dress, or do I look ugly in this suit? And telling the person no or not knowing. And you're almost taking a risk when you say the person, and the person you don't think if the person looks ugly in the suit and you say no, it's either taking the risk that they'll come to the conclusion, get mad at you later for not telling them, or it's about letting them face the reality to begin with. So it's better to let them face the reality to begin with, other than taking the risk and obviously leaving that risk open for them to find out, get mad at you, build up frustration, cause cognitive dissonance, finally leading like, okay, now he told me a lie. Am I supposed to, can I trust people anymore? This mechanism where you're constantly between a rock and a hard place, wondering where you are. It's either dealing, and from the person's point of view experiencing, it's either dealing with the negative, is my nose crooked, and then dealing with that, the superficial things, like dealing with that, is my nose crooked, or having them tell you a lie, based on if you want them to tell you a lie or not, if they're lying or whatever it may be, regardless of the reason they're lying, either dealing with that lying and causing cognitive dissonance and frustration, or dealing with the fact that your nose is crooked and you can't do anything about it, or you have to go through some surgery, whatever it may be. You're between a rock and a hard place, and it's about dealing with those on either the one side or the other. And I guess it's better to learn your lesson earlier, like I said, than later, so that you can probably make more of that lesson on, especially when you're taking the risk of just learning the lesson later on if you don't learn it earlier. And because the idea of not going, depending on the circumstance, the idea of moving forward without learning a lesson is very unlikely. Depending on the circumstances, likely, considering different individual circumstances. Well, it's sort of like the life game. You're taking a risk every time you decide to have a kid, and it's better not to make the decision just to avoid that kind of situation, other than taking the risk and learning out later by bringing a person in this world having a liability on you and not just them. Having, you're bringing sort of like having the person saying, okay, well, I have to wait in a parking lot for an hour, and but the person that is there is mentally disabled and they need satisfaction. They need to walk around and say they need to walk around in a Walmart for an hour so that they get satisfaction. So it's about satisfying a person's needs. Say it's your son that's mentally disabled, your child, and you're watching them. You brought them in the world. You have a liability on yourself. You caused a liability on them. They're mentally disabled. You caused yourself trouble. You're causing yourself trouble by risking for them. And obviously you're going against your practical idea of what means something by letting them go in the Walmart for an hour, and you have to let them satisfy. And it's about mitigating the deprivation and the pain or the suffering as much as you can. So since you brought them in this world, or her in this world, then you have to help make it against their suffering, and it becomes a liability on you. It's your responsibility, though, so you have extra weight on you when it comes to making these decisions and understanding every circumstance and everything. So when you consider that, you have to you put a liability on yourself and them, and you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because, you got to get home in 50 minutes or 15 minutes, but he's only been in there for 20 minutes and he wants to be in there for an hour to air himself out, whatever it may be, whatever thing may be. He wants to be at the park for an hour or whatever it may be. He wants to spend $1,000 on something. It was your responsibility to begin with to consider all these things that could have happened, taking the risk, understanding the risk just from conception, taking the risk without taking any scapegoats or any excuses of taking away that way. That's another idea that popped into my head that I was considering. So yeah, it's about validation, taking accountability and responsibility, and the unwillingness to take responsibility and accountability for yourself. So I think that's all I want to say, and how it's difficult. So you're pretty much validation confiscation is what you're doing. Is you're confiscating your validity when you don't have anyone else believing what you're believing, and you need to rely on someone else, have a preconceived bias buying it, and then having that person believe something else, fooling yourself into adopting their own opinion, and the own opinion comes into you. All of a sudden you just start spewing and regurgitating things verbatim, say, from someone that you've heard, and it changes your opinion either consciously or subconsciously, and you start taking whatever they say as fact and so on. You get engulfed in it. That's the Borg mentality, and just listening to what you say, being a follower, and almost in a way admitting it, especially by just veracity of doing it. So yeah, I think that's all I need to say. I might mention something else in another video, so that's it. I don't want this to go on too long. So thank you. Until next time. Goodbye.